After 5 years of careful planning, I stood outside Courtroom 6 in the Travis County Family Courthouse in Austin, Texas, clutching my worn brown leather briefcase. The morning sun filtered through the tall windows, casting long shadows on the marble floor, but I felt no warmth from it. Vanessa, my wife of 8 years, walked ahead of me, her arm linked with Trent's. She was 34, dressed like she was heading to a victory parade rather than a divorce, hearing a crisp white pencil skirt, red Louboutin heels clicking with authority, her hair pulled back in a sleek ponytail. Trent, her 29-year-old lover, matched her stride in a fitted gray suit, his wrist flashing the Omega watch she'd bought with our joint credit card. They looked like a couple on their way to celebrate, not dismantle, a marriage. As we approached the doors, Vanessa turned slightly, her green eyes meeting mine for a split second. She leaned in close, her perfume a sharp citrus scent I'd once loved wafting over me. "After today, I'll be a free woman, and a rich one," she whispered, her voice laced with triumph. "And you'll be starting over from nothing." Her lips curved into a smile that didn't reach her eyes, then she straightened and pushed through the doors, Trent right beside her, chuckling softly as if they'd shared an inside joke. I didn't react. No raised voice, no clenched fists. I just followed them in my steps, measured and unhurried. Inside the courtroom was stark wooden benches, a raised judge's podium, and the faint hum of fluorescent lights. Vanessa and Trent took seats on one side, her lawyer Howard Flint already waiting with a stack of documents. Flint was known for carving up wealthy husbands in these proceedings, his reputation built on aggressive settlements. Vanessa leaned over to him, whispering something that made him nod confidently. Trent squeezed her hand under the table, his smug expression saying it all. They thought they had this won. I sat alone on the other side, no lawyer by my side, just me and my briefcase. The bailiff called the session to order, and Judge Cynthia Monroe, a no-nonsense woman in her early 60s with wire-rimmed glasses, entered and took her seat. She adjusted her robe and scanned the room. "Hart v. Hart. Are both parties present?" "Yes, Your Honor," Flint replied smoothly, rising to his feet. Vanessa stood beside him, her posture perfect, exuding the poise of someone who believed she deserved everything. I stood as well, nodding. "Present, Your Honor." The proceedings began with the usual formalities: confirmation of identities, acknowledgement of the divorce petition. Vanessa had filed 6 months ago, citing irreconcilable differences. But I knew the real reason. It had started 2 years back, subtle at first. Her design trips for her online interior business stretched longer. Bills for spas, dinners, and hotels popped up on our statements, places I'd never heard of. Late-night texts from business partners that she dismissed with a wave. Then, one evening 6 months ago, I'd found her iPad left open in the living room. A message thread with Trent. "Finally, I'll be free from that boring shadow. You ready? We'll have it all." Attached were photos of them together laughing in a hotel suite I'd indirectly paid for. Trent, her personal trainer, living off the life I'd built through years of architecture designs and real estate flips. I didn't confront her that night. No shouting, no accusations. Instead, I printed the entire conversation, made copies, and drove to Denver to meet Patricia Doyle, the discreet attorney I'd hired 5 years earlier. That was after my first major setback, a business partner who'd betrayed me, leaving me broke and teaching me a hard lesson about trust. "Pat," I'd said over coffee in her office, "it's time to activate the plan." "You sure?" She'd asked, her eyes sharp behind her glasses. "Not revenge," I'd replied. "Just making sure she can't ruin anyone else like this." Patricia had helped me fortify everything back then. We'd set up trusts, LLCs, and offshore entities, all legal, all ironclad, all before Vanessa even suspected. Now, as I sat in the courtroom watching her whisper to Trent, I felt the weight of those preparations. The bailiff handed the judge the initial filings, and Flint began his opening. "Your Honor, my client seeks an equitable division of marital assets." I tuned him out for a moment, my mind steady. Vanessa glanced my way, her smile faltering just a bit when she saw my calm expression. She had no idea the game she'd started was one I'd already won. The judge cleared her throat. "Mr. Hart, do you have representation today?" "No, Your Honor," I said evenly. "I'll represent myself." A murmur rippled through the room. Vanessa's eyes widened slightly, but she quickly masked it with another confident tilt of her chin. Trent leaned back, arms crossed, as if this was just a formality. Little did they know the real show was about to begin. As Judge Monroe finished reviewing the initial filings, Howard Flint launched into his detailed list of demands. Your Honor, the marital estate includes 4 commercial properties in Travis County, 2 investment condos in Houston, 3 luxury vehicles, a Mercedes GLE, a Tesla Model S, and a Porsche Cayenne Plus savings accounts totaling $2.4 million, and shares in Hart Development LLC, valued at $5.1 million. My client has been a devoted wife for 8 years, supporting Mr. Hart's career from its humble beginnings. She seeks only her fair share under Texas community property laws. Vanessa sat there, her hands still intertwined with Trent's under the table, nodding along with a practiced look of quiet resolve. She glanced at me again, her eyes gleaming with what she must have thought was impending victory. I could almost hear her thoughts. The poor fool sitting there alone, about to lose half of everything he's built. But as Flint droned on, my mind drifted back to how we'd gotten here. 8 years ago, Vanessa and I had met at an art gallery opening in Austin. She was a vibrant high school art teacher, then full of passion for painting and design with a laugh that could light up a room. I was already establishing myself as an architect, flipping my first few properties on the side. Our dates were simple picnics by Lady Bird Lake, late-night talks about our dreams. She loved my steadiness. She said the way I planned everything down to the last detail. "You're my rock, Caleb," she'd whisper during those early days. We married in a small ceremony at a hill country vineyard, just family and close friends. For the first few years, it was good. I built Hart Development from a one-man operation into a mid-sized firm designing custom homes and investing in commercial spaces. Vanessa quit teaching to start her online interior design business using my network to land clients. We'd celebrate wins together, her first big commission. My closing on a downtown Austin office building. Our home in Terrytown was modest but comfortable, filled with her artistic touches, abstract paintings on the walls, custom furniture she'd sourced. But about 2 years ago, things shifted. It started subtly. She'd come home from client meetings, later than usual, her cheeks flushed, stories vague. "Just networking, babe," she'd say, pecking me on the cheek before disappearing into her office. The bills crept up: spa days at high-end resorts, dinners at places like Uchi or Jeffrey's that she claimed were for business. I noticed the new clothes, the jewelry, but I didn't push. I trusted her. Or at least I wanted to. Then came the distance. Our conversations turned superficial. She'd scroll through her phone during dinner, laughing at messages I wasn't privy to. Intimacy faded. She'd cite stress from her growing business. I poured more into work, thinking if I provided stability, things would improve. But deep down, I knew better. I'd been burned before. 10 years ago, before Vanessa, I'd had a fiancée named Laura. We were engaged, building a life together, when my first big real estate deal went south. A partner embezzled funds, leaving me bankrupt. Laura didn't stick around. "I can't do broke Caleb," she'd said, packing her bags and walking out with half my remaining assets through a quickie divorce. It shattered me. I slept on friends' couches, rebuilt from scratch, vowing never to let love blind me to risk again. That's why 5 years ago, shortly after marrying Vanessa, I'd quietly hired Patricia Doyle, a sharp attorney in Denver, specializing in asset protection. "I don't want to be caught off guard again," I'd told her over our first meeting in her sleek office overlooking the Rockies. Patricia, with her no-nonsense demeanor and years of handling high-net-worth divorces, nodded. "We'll make you bulletproof." Over the next few months, we executed the plan meticulously. First, I transferred all my commercial properties, the office buildings in Travis County and the condos in Houston, to a parent company headquartered in Wyoming. It was structured as a limited liability entity with an independent trustee, ensuring nothing could be touched as marital property. Wyoming's laws were favorable for privacy and protection. Next, the personal assets, cars, our home furnishings, even some jewelry, everything went under Hart Management LLC, a company I'd formed before the marriage, using inheritance from my parents. It was all documented as premarital assets funded solely by my prior capital. The bank accounts were trickier but crucial. I moved the bulk of our savings into the Hart Irrevocable Trust, naming my niece as the beneficiary. Established a year before the wedding, it was untouchable. What remained in joint accounts was minimal, just enough to cover day-to-day life, around $148,900 at the time of filing. Vanessa never knew. She handled our household finances superficially, assuming everything was in both our names. "You're so good with the boring stuff," she'd tease. I let her believe it. Why rock the boat when things were good? But as her behavior changed, I was glad for the safeguards. In the months leading to the divorce, while she plotted with Trent, I watched silently. They placed a deposit on a luxury condo in Scottsdale, Arizona, using her business credit line, which unbeknownst to her was tied to my LLC. She hired Flint the Shark lawyer, famous for aggressive splits. Just $1 or $2 million from him and we're set for life. I'd overheard her say to Trent one night on a recorded call I'd installed discreet security cams after the first suspicions. Trent, the gym rat with ambitions bigger than his biceps, egged her on. "Make sure you get the Tesla. I hate your old sedan." They laughed about their future oblivious. The night before the hearing, I sat in my home office, now just mine, reviewing the stack of evidence, printed texts, photos from private investigators' GPS logs tracking her trips to hotels with Trent. Patricia had prepped me over the phone. "Stick to the facts, Caleb, no emotion. Let the documents speak." I closed the folder, staring at the wedding photo on my desk, smiling under that vineyard arch. How had it come to this? But I knew. Vanessa had chosen glamour over loyalty, and I'd chosen protection over blind trust. Back in the courtroom, Flint wrapped up his pitch. The judge turned to me. "Mr. Hart, your response." I stood opening my briefcase. "Your Honor, I don't contest the divorce, but I do contest the asset division for these reasons." I began handing over the documents one by one, my voice steady as steel. I rose slowly, my briefcase open on the table beside me. The courtroom air felt thick-charged with the weight of anticipation from Vanessa's side. Flint had just finished his monologue painting her as the supportive spouse who'd sacrificed for our marriage. It was a good performance, calculated, emotional, without overdoing it. Vanessa dabbed at her eyes with a tissue, playing the part of the wronged wife to perfection. Trent sat next to her, his posture relaxed, one arm draped casually over the back of her chair, as if this was all just a minor hurdle before their new life. Judge Monroe turned her gaze to me. "Mr. Hart, you've heard the petitioner's claims. How do you respond?" I cleared my throat, keeping my voice even, like I was presenting a building blueprint to a client. "Your Honor, as I said, I don't contest the dissolution of the marriage. Vanessa wants out, and I'm fine with that. But the asset division, that's where I disagree." I pulled out the first folder from my briefcase, a thick sheaf of documents, each one notarized and time-stamped. The clerk approached, and I handed them over one by one, explaining as I went. "First, the 4 commercial properties in Travis County." I passed the relevant papers. "These were transferred to Hart Wyoming Holdings, a parent company established 5 years ago before any marital issues arose. The entity is based in Wyoming with an independent trustee. Under Texas law, these are not community property. They're separate assets protected by the corporate structure." Flint leaned forward, his brow furrowing. "Objection, Your Honor. We weren't provided these documents in discovery." The judge held up a hand, scanning the pages. "Continue, Mr. Hart. I'll address relevance shortly." I nodded and moved on. The 2 investment condos in Houston, similarly, they're under Hart Management LLC, formed pre-marriage with capital from my inheritance. No marital funds were used. Here's the incorporation paperwork and funding records. Vanessa shifted in her seat, her confident facade cracking just a bit. She whispered something to Flint, who shook his head slightly, his earlier smugness fading. Next, the vehicles. I continued sliding over another set of documents. The Mercedes, Tesla, and Porsche are all registered to the LLC as business assets. They were purchased for company use, client meetings, site visits. Again, premarital entity, no community claim. Trent's arm slipped from Vanessa's chair. He glanced at her, then at me, his eyes narrowing. The room was silent now, save for the rustle of papers as the judge flipped through them. "The savings accounts," I said, handing over bank statements. "The joint one holds $148. $900, that's fair game for division. But the rest transferred years ago to the Hart Irrevocable Trust. Beneficiary is my niece, established before the marriage. It's locked in irrevocable and untouchable in divorce proceedings." Flint stood up. "Your Honor, this is ambush litigation. My client had no knowledge of these structures." Judge Monroe peered over her glasses at him. "Mr. Flint, discovery is your responsibility, but let's hear the rest. I saved the best for last. Finally, Your Honor, I submit evidence of marital misconduct that should influence any equitable distribution." I pulled out the envelope photos from the PI time-stamped text logs, GPS data, showing Vanessa's business trips aligning with hotel check-ins alongside Trent. These document an ongoing affair for the past 12 months in violation of our marital vows. Under Texas fault-based considerations, this impacts alimony and asset claims. The courtroom erupted in murmurs. Vanessa's face drained of color, her hand flying to her mouth. "Caleb, what is this?" she whispered loud enough for the front row to hear. Trent froze his eyes, darting to the exit. He slowly released her hand, scooting his chair back an inch. Flint grabbed the documents from the clerk, rifling through them frantically. "Your Honor, these are unsubstantiated. We need time to verify." The judge took the stack, her expression stern, as she reviewed the text's explicit messages about their plans, photos of them together in places funded by our joint accounts. She set them down after a long minute. "Mr. Flint, these appear authenticated with metadata and timestamps. Mrs. Hart, is there anything you'd like to say?" Vanessa stammered, tears welling up, not the calculated ones from earlier, but real panic. It's not what it looks like." "Caleb, how could you—" I met her gaze steadily. "It's exactly what it looks like, Vanessa. You planned this." Trent stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. Without a word, he turned and headed for the doors, his trench coat flapping behind him. Vanessa reached out. "Trent, wait." But he didn't look back. The door clicked shut, leaving her alone with Flint, who was now sweating visibly. Judge Monroe tapped her gavel lightly to restore order. "We'll take a short recess for me to review these in chambers. Mr. Flint, prepare any counter-arguments. Court resumes in 15 minutes. As the room buzzed with whispers, I sat back down, closing my briefcase. Vanessa stared at me, her world unraveling in real time. I'd waited 5 years for this moment, not out of vengeance, but preparation. And now the facade was cracking. The recess felt eternal, though it was only 15 minutes. I sat motionless, staring at the wood grain on the table, my mind replaying the documents I'd just unleashed. Across the aisle, Vanessa paced near the back of the room, her heels echoing faintly. Flint huddled with her, gesturing wildly at the papers, his voice a low hiss I couldn't make out. Trent had returned from wherever he'd slunk off to, but he hovered by the door now, his earlier confidence evaporated. He avoided eye contact with everyone, especially her. The bailiff announced the judge's return, and we all stood as Monroe re-entered, her expression unreadable behind those glasses. She settled in, tapping her gavel once for silence. "Court is back in session. I've reviewed the submitted documents. Mr. Flint, any additional arguments?" Flint rose, adjusting his tie. "Your Honor, my client was unaware of these corporate structures. This feels like a deliberate concealment. We request time to investigate and possibly amend the petition." Monroe shook her head slightly. "The documents are dated notarized and compliant with state law. Premarital assets and irrevocable trusts are standard protections. Mrs. Hart signed a prenup acknowledging separate property, though it seems she didn't read it closely." She turned to the evidence of the affair. "As for the misconduct claims, the text photos and GPS data are compelling. Texas allows fault to influence distribution, and this qualifies." Vanessa let out a small gasp, her hand clutching the table edge. Her makeup, so flawless earlier, was starting to smear from the stress. Trent shifted uncomfortably, inching toward the exit again. The judge continued, her voice steady and final. "The 4 Travis County properties and Houston condos are confirmed as separate assets under the Wyoming entity and LLC. No community claim. The vehicles are business property of the premarital LLC, same ruling. Savings, only the joint account of $140,900 is divisible. The trust funds are irrevocable and predate the marriage. They're off limits." Flint opened his mouth, but Monroe cut him off. "All other requests for alimony or shares in Hart Development are denied due to proven marital misconduct. The marriage is dissolved effective immediately. Mrs. Hart receives half the joint account after fees, approximately $74,450 each, pending final calculation. Court costs split evenly." The gavel struck a sharp crack that echoed like the final nail in a coffin. Vanessa collapsed into her chair, her shoulders shaking. "No! This can't be—" she muttered, tears streaming now, not the controlled ones for show, but raw panicked sobs. "Howard, fix this!" Flint packed his briefcase hastily, muttering apologies. "We can appeal, but it's airtight." Trent didn't wait. He stood abruptly, his face pale, and bolted for the door without a backward glance. The slam of it closing made Vanessa flinch. She called after him weakly, "Trent, Trent." But he was gone, leaving her alone in the wreckage. I gathered my papers methodically, sliding them back into the briefcase. No rush, no triumph in my movements. The judge nodded at me. "Mr. Hart, You've presented your case well. Court adjourned. As I turned to leave, Vanessa's voice cut through the room, desperate and broken. Caleb, wait, please. She stood wobbling on those red heels, her white skirt now wrinkled. I'm sorry, I didn't mean... We can talk about this, fix it. I paused at the aisle's end, looking back at her. Her eyes pleaded, but I saw the truth in them, not regret for us, but terror at losing the life she'd imagined. You didn't love me, Vanessa, I said quietly, my voice carrying just to her. You loved what I had, and I've been prepared for this day for a long time. Her face crumpled further, but I didn't stay to watch. I pushed through the doors, the Texas sunlight blinding as I stepped outside. The air was hot and dry, a stark contrast to the chilled courtroom. I walked to my Ford F-150 in the parking lot, the old reliable truck I'd kept separate from everything else, and climbed in. As I started the engine, my phone buzzed. Patricia. How'd it go? She asked when I answered. Exactly as planned, I replied, pulling out onto the street. She's getting the joint account half. Everything else held? Good, no loose ends. None. I paused at a light, glancing in the rearview mirror at the courthouse, shrinking behind me. Thanks, Pat, for everything. You built the fortress, Caleb. I just drew the blueprints, she chuckled softly. Take care of yourself now. I hung up the city, blurring past as I drove. My mind flicked back to 5 years ago in her Denver office. I'd just married Vanessa, full of hope, but Laura's betrayal still fresh. If I ever lose again, I told Patricia, it won't be because I wasn't prepared. We'd spent months layering the protections trusts, LLCs, entities designed to shield without hiding, legal, ethical, unbreakable. Now as I merged onto the highway toward home, a weight lifted. Not joy, not vengeance, just relief. The house waited empty now, but mine. No more pretending, no more wondering. I'd protected what mattered, and in the end, that's all that counted. 3 months passed like a quiet exhale after a long-held breath. I still lived in the Terrytown house I'd built with my own designs, solid brick exterior, open-concept kitchen, where Vanessa and I used to argue over paint colors. Now it was just me, the rooms echoing a bit more, but peaceful. No lingering traces of her. I donated her things to charity the week after the hearing. My routine hadn't changed much. Early mornings at the office, sketching new developments, closing deals on properties that kept Hart Development thriving. I drove the same old Ford F-150, its engine rumbling reliably as I navigated Austin's traffic. The truck wasn't flashy, but it was mine, premarital, untouched by the divorce. Word got around through mutual friends about Vanessa. I didn't seek it out, but Austin's circles were small, news traveled. She was renting a cramped one-bedroom in Round Rock, a suburb about 20 minutes north, nothing like the luxury she'd envisioned in Scottsdale. After taxes, lawyer fees, and paying off the credit card debts she'd racked up mostly on gifts for Trent and her business trips, her share of the joint account dwindled to around $39,000. Enough to scrape by for a while, but not the millionaire lifestyle she'd bragged about. From what I heard, she'd lost everything else. The credit cards were canceled the day after the ruling. They were tied to my LLCs. The Mercedes she'd driven repossessed as company property. Her online design business faltered without the backing of my network clients dried up when word of the affair spread. She was back to job hunting, maybe waitressing or freelance gigs, eating instant noodles and cheap wine in that dim apartment. One acquaintance mentioned seeing her at a grocery store loading up on discount items her once manicured nails chipped, and Trent vanished like smoke. Blocked her on everything no goodbye. He'd taken the Omega watch. The laptop she'd bought him, souvenirs of their fling, I suppose. Last I heard through the grapevine, he was back at the gym training new clients, probably spinning tales of his crazy ex. No loyalty there. He'd been in it for the payout that never came. I didn't gloat, didn't check her social media or drive by her place. That chapter was closed. Instead, I focused on what mattered, expanding the firm, maybe mentoring young architects. Patricia called occasionally to check in, her voice warm over the line. You holdin' up. Better than ever, or I'd say and mean it. Through her, I met Caitlin, a red-haired attorney in her late 30s, sharp-witted with a laugh that reminded me of simpler times. We'd grabbed dinner a few times, Italian, at a quiet spot downtown, talking shop about real estate law. Nothing serious yet. I wasn't rushing. After Laura and now Vanessa, I knew love wasn't about filling voids, but finding someone who didn't create them. One evening, standing on my balcony overlooking the city lights, Austin sprawling out like a glittering map, I thought about her. Vanessa had chosen that path glamour over substance betrayal, over commitment. I'd given her stability, trust, a life we'd built together. In return, she'd plotted to strip it away. But I'd learned from the past, that irrevocable trust, those LLCs, they weren't weapons, they were shields. Shields I'd forged 5 years ago when hope was high, but caution higher. She probably sat in her small room now, the walls closing in, regretting not the loss of us, but the loss of what she thought was hers. Instant ramen cooling on a microwave tray, a half-empty bottle of bargain wine on the nightstand, the hum of a cheap fan drowning out the silence. Lessons like that didn't come cheap, they cost everything. As for me, I sipped my coffee, the night air cool on my skin. I'd won not because of money or cunning, but because I'd refused to be broken again. Some games you don't play to win, you prepare so you can't lose. And in the end, that's the real fortune.